Hi everyone, Editing Steph here. I don't normally start with Editing Steph at the beginning of a vlog, but I think given that I was contemplating just not uploading this vlog at all or editing it this week, I just feel like I need to say something off the bat. The world is a bit rubbish at the moment, and from my little corner of the world, it's kind of been devastating to see what's happening overseas in multiple places, and then to see what's kind of been happening on BookTok and Bookstagram, and people claiming that it's a safe space and that people who read books should not have a political opinion that they share in such a space, which I find deeply ironic given that this vlog is an anthology reaction to a collection that was put together to raise funds for Palestine. I feel like what I need to say at the start of this video is if you are not aware, books are inherently political. The act of reading is political. If that's not something you stand with, this may not be the channel for you to keep watching, and that's totally fine. Like, if that's not for you, that's not for you. But the very act of reading has always been political, because throughout history people have tried to control who can and cannot read, who has access to reading materials. Even today we know that there are books that are banned, and people are trying to control what it is that people have the right to read. You cannot exist in a bookish space where you are actively talking about books without considering the implications of politics in this space. I don't really care what your views are on that. That's a simple fact. The very right to read, to choose what you have to read, like, we all have choice, right? And that's totally fine. I know I try to make the best choices I can. I can always do better. That goes for a lot of things. But I don't think, particularly in this connected world anymore, go around saying, well, you can't talk about these things because this is my safe space. If you need a safe space, then you can cultivate your environment around that. It's very easy to do in social media. The block button is a feature. But the fact is reality, and we have to accept that what we choose to promote, what we choose to share, has an impact on people and on communities. I'm just putting that out there. If people do not know that about me, I would hope that you would. I would hope that you would. In light of everything, I think it just bears repeating, okay? I'm happy to engage in respectful discourse on this, but anything that comes across as blatantly disrespectful or rude is going to be shut down. Please keep that in mind as you move forward and continue to watch my content. Hopefully you enjoy this video, and if you are not in a space to enjoy this video at this point in time, that's totally fine as well. But yeah, we're going to start talking about the Love Archives. Hi everyone, my name is Steph. This is the Novelty Corner, and welcome to another reading vlog. Today I am going to be reading the Love Archives Volume 4, which was a charity anthology for Palestine, and I had to pick up a physical copy as opposed to the ebook copy. I do have Volume 1 as an ebook, I think, but this one had Emily Rath's story in it, which is the one that I really wanted to read. It also has a few other authors I have read before or that I'm curious to, you know, try for the first time, and I thought I would do this as an anthology wrap up. There is something like 30-ish stories in here, so it's not overly long, so the stories are quite short. But given that there are 30 stories, I'm not going to stop and film 30 clips. What I might try and do is maybe read 3 stories and then talk about them and sort of share the highlights. I'm also, interestingly enough, on theme reading or listening to The Palestine Laboratory by Anthony Lowenstein, which has the subtitle How Israel Exports the Technology of Occupation Around the World, because what's happening in Gaza is still happening. It hasn't gone away. It is deeply atrocious, and it, just because you don't see it all the time on social media or the news now, it's still happening. So, you know, let's keep the focus on that. So I'm kind of reading this alongside the non-fiction, and that non-fiction is terrifying. There's so many things that you kind of realize, but you also don't realize until you hear it laid out in fairly simple terms about exactly what's going on. So I'm going to be reading this. I will update you as I go through. As I said, this is the one with Emily Rath's story, which links into the Pucking Around universe, so of course I wanted to read that. Karina Halley is also in here, and I want to try some of her work just because I would like to support her as an author. Tiffany Roberts is in here. Callie Belly is in here. Who else? Cleo Evans I've read before. I think those are the only ones. Sarah Blue I know of. I think I DNF'd a Sarah Blue book, to be honest. But anyway, it seems to be a mix of sports romance, why choose historical, sci-fi, paranormal romance. Maybe a bit of mafia, maybe. I don't know. I will keep you updated as I'm reading this. All right, so I am 3 stories in. The first one by Kalia Reid is from her Surviving Time series, which seems to be a historical romance but involves time travel. So the FMC Serene is from the future and is now in the past, I'm assuming. So all of the stories I've read so far have been connected to other series, either as prequels or as sequels. I have to say that the first one I read was probably my favorite so far. That's the time travel historical one, and it's mostly just a scene between the FMC and the MMC. Post story, obviously they're having kids and she's worried that, you know, she's going to get sucked back forward in time. So there is some artwork in here as well. The second story is called The Chase, which is part of A Here Lives a Corpse. It's an alternate POV from that book. That's by C.L. Matthews, which is a bully why choose romance, which not really my thing. Sorry if there is an angle change. I had to change the battery on the camera because I probably should have checked that before I started. That's okay, we had a spare already charged. And the third story was by J. Lee Brown, which was Dirty Weekend, which is a bonus scene from A Dumpster Fire, which is a why choose story with 2 brothers and the FMC, which also not really my thing, but that's okay. So the next 3 authors on the list are Gillian Rink, S.B. Hazel, and Sarah Blue. We'll see how we go. All right, so the next story was Christmas Morning, which is an epilogue to Ready or Not by Gillian Rink, which is an Omegaverse story. This one is a Christmas morning story, and it's actually just really sweet because it's the Omega and her alphas waking up on Christmas morning before their kids do, and she gives them their Christmas gift, which is basically finding out she's pregnant again. It was just sweet. Actually, what I'll try and do is leave a list of the full-length books that I mention in the description below so that if you're interested, you can check them out. The second one is a novella that takes place at Halloween in a sex club. It is from the Free Fall Twisted Bonds series by S.B. Hazel. This one is intriguing because it's kind of just like a one-night encounter at this sex club and everyone's masked and no one knows what's going on, and it's a menage story. I think the series itself, from what I gathered while I was looking it up, it is a darker romance, which I don't know how I feel about that. Of the 3 that I've read from this particular little section, it was the one I was most intrigued by. And then the last story in this little section was, I think it's an alternate or bonus scene from One Pucked Up Pack by Sarah Blue, which is the book that I DNF'd. So I cannot say that my feelings about that story have improved from reading this little short. Again, it's an Omegaverse story. It's a hockey story, but it is mostly an Omegaverse story. We all know Omegaverse is not for me, but this one does include some artwork as well. So the next section has a little thing that says paranormal romance, so maybe there'll be some paranormal romance in this section. I'm not quite sure. No, maybe they are using those as little chapter breaks, but I don't know if they're grouping everything together. So I guess we'll find out as I read the book. The next 3 stories, the first one is called Don't Stop, which is alternate version, it says, from Wolfbait by Kiara Delahunt. So this is a paranormal romance between 2 shifters. One of them is clearly still attached to a pack where her ex is in charge and she doesn't really want to be there, and the MMC is someone who I'm assuming is teaching her in self-defense or something like that. Anyway, it's very short. The second story has probably been the one that I've enjoyed the most so far. It's Karina Halley's short story, which is called Venetian Blood, and is part of the Experiment in Terror, which is a crossover between Experiment in Terror and Blood Orange. I just looked up Experiment in Terror. It is a ghost hunting series. How did I not know Karina Halley had a ghost hunting series? Anyway, it is about Dex and Perry, who are in Venice for their ghost hunting show or video podcast kind of thing, and they're a bit disappointed. They've been on a ghost tour and it wasn't really satisfactory, and then they meet a guy who's just a little bit creepy, and it turns out that he's a vampire. So that's right up my alley, and that's a series that I will keep on my radar because that was really fun to read. And then the third one is called Pretending, and it's from The Desiccated Part 2. It's an excerpt from that by NJ Ember, and honestly I just had a really hard time following the story, so I couldn't keep track of what was going on. So that's that one, and I'm gonna have some lunch and then I'm going to continue, but I'm about a third of the way, almost a third of the way through, which
it's pretty good. I'm not really sure where to go with the next 3 stories because honestly none of them really grabbed my attention, but that's fine, par for the course, because in an anthology not everything is going to be for you. If I need to, I will go through my entire rationale for why I read anthologies at the end of the video. The first story I read in this section was The Assassin, which is a Faded Tides past life short story by Sarah Faith Sanders. So what I gather is that this author writes the same couple but in various reincarnations. Like, it was fine, but it kind of made the story a little bit tricky to follow. The second one was by Tanya Lin. This was My Soul Is His. That's part of Your Soul Is Ours. It's an extended epilogue. This one is about 2 people who are being chased by a demon, but it's really clear that the female protagonist has a lot of mental health issues, and there's mention of suicide and sort of shadow demons being a manifestation of that. So again, not really my thing, but you know, not terrible writing, just not my thing. And then I'm kind of 50-50 on the third story that I read, which was Throne Room, which is a deleted scene from Falling for Lucifer by Taylor Schaefer, which is a romance between a character called Lamina and Lucifer. And they've been in a relationship, there's a fated mates sort of thing going on, and she's already had 1 child and she wants a baby. So this one's all about making a baby. Again, not my personal thing, but the writing style was fine. I do like Lucifer stories. I just don't often find really well-written ones or ones that do what I want them to do. So the next section we're moving into is apparently the sci-fi mix. So let's go. So the first story in this section was Ghost, which is part of the An Unnatural or Dreamwalker Book 1 Alternate POV by H.M. Duval, which is a sci-fi romance. I don't quite know where. I would have liked a little bit of world building or just, you know, context for this one. Anyway, our male protagonist is walking across the planet, whatever planet it is, and he is falling for a dreamwalker who's in his dreams, and then at the end of the chapter she starts shooting at him. So I don't know. The next one I read was Fervent Heart, which is a Shielded Heart short story by Tiffany Roberts. So I have read Tiffany Roberts before. They write sci-fi, alien, monster, romance kind of stories, and that's what this one fell into. This one does have content warnings for minor reference to abuse and slavery, non-human anatomy, aka a tail that gets used, and light S&M play. It's 2 characters from one of their books, and it's the female protagonist exploring a more dominant side of her personality. I mean, it's a monster romance. If you like that, you'll probably enjoy this one. Artwork piece to accompany it. And then we moved into the sports romance section. So we know we're getting close to the story that I want to read. And there was a short story called Thin Ice, which is a deleted scene from The Face Off by Kelly Melly. It is a college hockey romance. I'm assuming it is a hate to love relationship. I don't think I've ever tried to read The Face Off, but I think I have tried to read Kelly Melly before. I'd have to look up. I may have DNF'd her. It's our 2 protagonists skating on an ice rink and then having sex on the ice rink, which, I don't know, to me that just seems weird. Anyway, there's a little bit of friction between the 2 of them, and it's just that scene on the ice. So clearly Kelly Melly writes steam in her books. And now we're going to continue because the next story is Emily Rath's story, so I'm ready. I don't care if I'm biased. Emily Rath is a freaking treasure, and that's because this little short or deleted scene is a deleted scene from a bonus, you know, short story that was in Pucking Ever After Volume 1. So it's part of the King of the Ice story from Pucking Ever After Volume 1. And it's essentially Jake and Caleb out at breakfast with Jamie and Tuo, who are the first 2 children that the Price family have. And Rachel and Mars are off while she's having an ultrasound. And so it's kind of, we find out from King of the Ice that Rachel is pregnant again. And so we kind of get the reveal of that in there, and it is so freaking precious. I mean, Jake and Caleb are just utterly adorable, and with the 2 boys, it's so sweet. Anyway, that was utterly delightful, and my favorite thing that I've read, you know, unsurprisingly. I just love that Emily just keeps coming back and just adds little stories, and it just builds out the world. And like, for someone who spent a lot of my teens deep diving into fandom and writing fan fiction and reading fan fiction and all of that sort of stuff, all I want is just extra stories of characters that I love. And I love the Price family so much. The second story is called The Auction. It was from Renegade Ruin. It's a deleted scene, and the author is Hayden Locke. This is a baseball romance, and I believe it's a player and the owner of the team. It's just a very short, steamy scene at a fundraising event. And then the third story was Rules for Living Together, which is from Hitting the Goal Line. It's a deleted chapter and the author is Jocelyn Soto. And it appears to be a hockey romance. There's no steamy scene in here. It's the two characters moving in together. I'm assuming that then it's going to become like a forced proximity romance. We now have about a third of the book left to go. So the next 3 stories include The First Encounter, which is an alternate POV from Brief Encounters by Scarlett Hopper, who I believe is an Australian author. This is a college hockey romance. Not my favorite. Like it's 1, 2, 3, sort of like 7 or 8 pages long, and there were multiple typos and whatnot. So I don't know, maybe I'll come back to Scarlett Hopper at some point. In the Zone is from She's a Grinder, or a short story related to She's a Grinder by Temba Sapphire, which I believe I own. I don't know if I've read it or not. Anyway, I own it, so I'll have to go and see if it's still there. And the author, I believe, is a Caribbean author, and it's the story of a hockey player, and I'm assuming like she's like a PR person or a bit something like that. Anyway, it's them reconnecting after time apart, and they're in a boardroom, and then there's some artwork. And then the third story I read in this section was Solstice Surprise, which is a short story from the Sex Wizards series by Alethea Forst. Kind of a role-playing scene on the solstice, and I did look up the Sex Wizards series just because I wanted to double check a couple of things. Like the first book in the series is described as a full-length adult fantasy, the first in the series. It's set in a sex-positive magical world. There's a kink-based magic system. The characters are the wizards of the Crux, which I'm assuming is the world, include pansexual, polyamorous, fantasy race, non-binary, gender non-conforming, and intersex characters. And that's representative in the short story. So that's kind of cool, kind of intrigued. I might add that one to the list to possibly check out more later. Anyway, how many more stories do we have to go? Maybe we might do 2 more check-ins, and I'll do 4 stories each for those check-ins. And it feels like we slipped straight into very steamy territory with the next lot of stories. So there is While Estrella Sleeps by Rowan Merrick, which is part of the Theirs to Crave series, or it's an alternate POV. And this one is a Why Choose story. Honestly, of the 4 stories, this is the one that I forgot almost immediately. Then there was Sinful Vows, which is part of the Prince of Lust series or book by K.L. Morrison. And this one is really interesting because it's Fallen Angels or the 7 Deadly Sins, and it was a Why Choose, and I was very intrigued by it. Very steamy, but I was very intrigued. Then we had Cleo Evans' story, which is a bonus scene to Little Souls of Fire, which was the barista story. So I've actually read this, I think I've read the entire series. So this was just revisiting the barista and Lucy, and I've forgotten the female protagonist's name. What is it? Oh, Trixie. Yes, that's right, Trixie. Okay, anyway, so it's a scene between the 3 of them. Kind of makes me want to go back and read that novella because it's been a while and I've forgotten so many things. I mean, Cleo Evans is who you go to if you want monster romance that is very short, very, very steamy, and just an enjoyable time. And then the 4th story I read was Spin the Bottle, which is part of the Vengeful Gods book. It's a bonus scene by Elliot Rose. This one I'm kind of intrigued to pick up. It's a dark revenge romance, but I'm kind of intrigued by it. I'm kind of intrigued by all 3 of these characters. It is a Why Choose story. It is MMFM, and this one basically starts out as a game of spin the bottle by the pool, and it gets as steamy as you think it will. I don't know, I don't like revenge stories. I mean, at least it's not a bully story. Revenge maybe I can handle. Is it enemies to lovers with ruthless, morally grey poly love interests? I mean, never say never, right? Oh, okay. Elliot Rose is a New Zealand author. That's awesome. I always like finding New Zealand romance authors, just like when I like finding Australian romance authors. Okay, we have 4 more stories to go. We've got this. All right, so we are at the end. So we have the last 4 stories. The first one is Sick Day, which is a deleted chapter from Losers Part 2 by Harley LaRue, who I actually have read before. I totally forgot that, just totally out of context. So this is another Why Choose story. It is a couple of them getting sick, the others coming over to take care of everyone. The one thing I will say is that the female protagonist is Jess and her sister is Steph, which hits a little bit too close to home for me in the naming department for siblings. But I mean, it's Harley LaRue, so it was well written. I just would probably need more context with the actual characters in the story. Then the second story was On Show. This is this is a bonus scene from the Surrender Duet by Scarlett King. This one is another Why Choose story, but it is MMMFF from memory. I think that's what I saw when I was looking it up. There's a stack of content warnings for this and for the series, but essentially it's exhibitionism in a sex club. Then the second last story I read was To Sin So Sweet, which is a bonus scene from the Kindale Academy by Dakota Wilde. Again, this is a Why Choose MMFM story. It is a polyamorous family. They've got a kid and it's the first time that they're having sex post first child. At a complete opposite end, because there's basically no steam in this story. The last story is Travel Plans, which is a short story from The Letters to Half Moon Street by Sarah Wallace. This is a queer historical romance with a bit of magic. It was just a bit of a 180 from the previous couple of short stories I read, so it kind of gave me whiplash. But it was very sweet. One more piece of artwork, and that is the Love Archives Volume 4 done. Overall, it was really interesting. Like, I've added a bunch of authors to my future to read list that I would like to explore more of. I just think it would be interesting. I mean, Emily Rath's story was still my favorite. I like the Karina Halley one, and also kind of Cleo Evans, just because made me want to go back and reread that series, which was just completely bonkers and over the top. While there was, you know, some order to the stories, I feel like you kind of probably just needed to sort it by genre. Some things felt a little out of place, but that's okay. That's totally fine. The key with all of these things is just to try new authors and to see where I fall. And I mean, as I said, there's authors that I want to try. There's also authors that I have no interest in continuing to read anything by, and that's totally fine. That's kind of my whole rationale for reading anthologies. At some point I will come back and read the first volume that I do have on Kindle, just because I think that's got Evie Mitchell's short story in there. But I'm glad I read this. Having the Emily Rath story just made my day. I'm such a fangirl. It's terrible. As I said before, I will leave a list of all of the authors and the books or the series that these short stories are related to down below, so if you want to check them out, you can. In the comments, I would love to know if you've read any of these authors. Are there any books or series that you've heard me talk about that I should definitely pick up? Let me know that as well. Otherwise, feel free to leave a watermelon emoji down below to let me know that you're here. As always, please, please, please stay aware of current happenings around the world. Make sure you are uplifting voices that need to be uplifted. I mean, what else is there to stay? Stay as connected as you can to what's going on. Be as active as you can within the space that you're in. Hopefully, I will have finished reading The Palestine Laboratory by next week, and I can talk about it a little bit more. Like, that's been a really eye-opening book, as I said at the start. I think it's easy to feel helpless, it's easy to forget what's going on, but I think just staying present and being aware as you can. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. It's always fun to explore an anthology. I have stacks of them. I have a stack of them that I just need to make my way through very slowly over time. Anyway, I hope that wherever you're on the world, you're staying safe and healthy, and I will see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye everyone.